what is a modified triadic palette? And why is this something that you need to know about? Well, triadic palette is something that will help you lay down harmony and character in your art in a way like you've never done it before. Color theory can be complicated, but this bite-sized piece will change the way you paint even if you are a total beginner. Plus, I will show you some watercolor-specific nuances that will help to take your work to the pro level. Hi, I'm Leila, a professional artist. Welcome to my studio. Remember to bookmark this channel by subscribing so that you can come back here anytime you want to. That way you can beat the algorithm suggestions and cater for your own needs. Also remember to share away this tutorial with others so that more people can benefit from all the knowledge that is in this video. I will quickly show you what traditional triadic palette is, and then I will show you the modifications that I'm talking about that would work specifically well with watercolor. After, I will paint little artworks to show you how these different variations can affect your own art. Also share some secrets along the way. All the demonstrations in this video I will be creating on a block of paper that was sent to me by Meeden. They did not sponsor this video, but they did send some of the materials to me for an honest review. They also included a tape, masking tape, for my test because they've heard that I had issues with the locally sourced tape that I can get, which is purple in color and can really interfere with the way your eye receives colors on your artwork. Meeden tape is closer to the color of the watercolor paper. So I'm very excited to test those things out, especially because I have heard from some of you that you guys love using this paper. I can't wait to test it out for myself. And as always, I will leave all the links in the description box. Paper is 100% cotton and 300 GSM. It is cold pressed, a little bit smaller than A4, 260 by 180 millimeters. So you can see the top layer is a protective sheet which is green. The paper itself is not green. On the top here we have a little entrance where we can just go in. You can do it with a nail, or you can do it with a painting knife to just separate, or even just a plastic knife if you want to separate the paper. The paper itself seems quite lovely, and as I expected for a cold pressed paper, has a moderate texture. Because it is a block of paper rather than just a pad, it is glued from all sides, which means that it will help you with buckling reduction. Can also be very handy if you like sketching on the go, because that way you don't need to worry about wind moving your pages or using extra clips and so on. The pack of tape that they sent me contains 3 different sizes and 2 rolls for each size. I do believe that they sell these on their website separately so that you can buy just 1 roll at a time as well. Here are all the sizes. Now let's have a look at what is a traditional triad limited palette. So here I have a color wheel, and this specific one, so you can see the 3 color here. So we've got a cool yellow, then we have a magenta, and we have the cyan. This is the contemporary printer color palette. If we look at the artist triad limited palette, this is, I'm sure you've seen those things before. So we've got the blue, yellow, and red. So these are the 3 colors. The main thing is that even though it's a limited palette, it's probably the most free variation of a limited palette because you can mix any color using these 3 colors. To make sure that you really understand what I mean, I'm going to open the limited triadic palette and create a chart. This is one of my favorite ways to do a chart for a 3 color combination. You build it up from one to the other, including the extra addition of water and of course all the mixing variations. This is my personal favorite way to do it. This is one of the first little hints that I promised to share. Pretty much build it up like a kid's game. Start at any point, adding another color or adjusting the value. So you can see how many colors I can create with just the 3 colors that I have chosen. I've used cadmium yellow medium, pyrrole red deep, and cobalt blue. If you really look at the whole thing, you can see that I really was not in need of any other color. I could create all variations of yellow from pale to deep, and going into yellowy green, creating a little bit more of the brownier variation of that by adding a little bit of red into the mix, is the orange with just the mix of the red and the yellow. Here you can see I've changed that color once again by adding more red, all the variations of that, then going into the red. So even just the red itself, see how many variations it can give us. Same if I mix a little bit of the other colors in there to create a reddish brown, going more into the purples and blues. So here you can see this little line coming down from pale pink going into purple. This is the blue that I've used without anything mixed in, and even then you can see how many variations. Here again with the addition of a little bit of yellow. Here as well, browny sort of a purple. So this is where I've got the purple, adding a little bit of yellow into it, neutralizes it and turns it into more of a brown variations. So you can imagine the variations that you can create on your paintings. The key here is to see how incredibly harmonious all of these colors are. This color here is very harmonious to this color here because they both share the same blue as the base. This color here and this color here are harmonious. Why? Because they've got the same red as the mother color. So you can see how using 3 colors on your palette does not limit you into mixing anything you want, but at the same time it creates this most beautiful underlaying effect of all colors being super harmonious. And just because you can mix all of this doesn't mean you need to. You can very easily build your work around here, for example, if you're working on florals, or here if you're working on the winter landscape, for instance, or here if you're working on the spring, and so on. You really don't need that many colors to create amazing effects. So this was the basic triad palette. Now let's have a look at the modified palette. And I will start with the closer variations of the triad palette to the traditional, and then move to the stronger deviations. For this palette, I will choose Anza Yellow Light, Open Rosa for red, Cobalt Teal for blue. The colors that I will be able to mix will be all the colors of the spectrum, but with a special feeling. Orange, purple, and green. And now mixing all the colors to create a variation of brown. If you watched everything here on YouTube and would like to see some more, that's probably time. Probably means that it's a time for you to go over to my Patreon page and check out the videos that are available there. I have a lot of in-depth videos, lots of posts and tutorials. We also do fun things like play games and vote for next tutorial and so on. So make sure that you go and check it out. And one of the most important things and benefits of being on Patreon is that you can get feedback on your own art. So if you're painting and you have questions or you're wondering about something, then Patreon is probably the right place for you to go to. Don't forget, you will be supporting this channel at the same time. I look forward to seeing you there. Now let's try Rutile Yellow for yellow, Deep Scarlet Red for the red, and Ultramarine Blue for blue. This is the green that we can mix with this, the purple, orange, and brown. Now, what if we change colors once again and use quinacridone gold for yellow, deep pyrrole red, and Prussian blue for blue? If we're using these colors, then this is the green we're going to achieve. This is the orange, the purple, and the brown. I want to show you another variation. And these are all still very classic colors. These are still all one pigment: Scarlet Lake, Cerulean Blue Chromium, Nickel Azo Yellow. Okay, so let's have a look at this combination. So this is the green that we got, orange, and the brown. Scarlet Lake is from Winsor & Newton, and it is a PR 188 for those of you who are interested. Nickel Azo Yellow is PY 151, and Cerulean Blue Chromium PB 36. I will leave images of all of this on my Patreon. So this is the first stage of modification of the triadic palette. So here we have not your classic red, blue, and yellow, but variations of those colors. Now all of those are just one pigment colors. So this is still staying quite close to the original, but already getting certain variations. What I want to show you now is that little secret that I was going to share, is that whenever I present this, for example, I'm working on the commission and I need to explain it to someone who does not deal with color every day. Best way is to imagine that these little swatches are windows. If you imagine that you are looking through this window onto the landscape, but instead of a landscape is going to be your painting, you will instantly get a good feel for what kind of a subject matter would suit each of these palettes, or vice versa, what palette you want to use for the actual painting. So if you imagine that each one of those colors is just a separate little pane of glass, and you are looking through it, and wherever the light that color casts on your full artwork will play a very, very significant role. What I really want you to take away from this exercise, that first line of windows that I did, is that you can see how by changing colors, even just one color, like for example here, if instead of rutile yellow I would use quinacridone gold yellow, these colors would also change. But it doesn't matter what I choose, they will all look harmonious because they all have the same three colors pre-mixed. If you know a little bit more about color theory or work with color a lot, you would probably know that you can go in and choose all tints or all pure hues or shades, for example. And of course, having colors that are very close together, like here, you can kind of almost say that they're probably shades because they're very deep colors. You can actually create a very different feel. Now, in the last section of this video, I will demonstrate it on little paintings that I will create with different variations so that you can actually see how it works within the actual landscape or still life or whatever it is you're working on. But before I do this, I want to show you even a further deviation from the standard palette, a modification that takes all of this to a whole other level. Now with watercolor, we have variations that we don't get in other mediums. For example, we have granulating colors, we have colors that are very transparent, we have colors that are opaque. And whenever you bring any one of those colors into the mix, you will get the most amazing effect. So for example, this is my swatch card for the palette that I have at the moment. I constantly change the colors in my palette. I move away the ones that I don't use and I add new ones. So here, what I'd like to show you is how you can modify your palette to include variations that are only available with watercolor. So if I will choose a color like Tundra Violet, by the way, now I'm removing the restriction for the single pigment colors. So I'm going to use that for blue, Hansa Yellow Light for the yellow spectrum, and Perylene Violet for the red spectrum of colors. What we're going to see now will be quite interesting because we've got the really bright yellow and pretty much a violet for the red. So the orange colors that we'll be mixing, or the prototype for the orange, will be quite browny in itself. Same as the green, and of course the mix of all three colors for the brown. So you can see how far away we can go with the variations. Now, because this is a tiny little swatch, it's really hard to see the granulation, but if we create a little artwork with this, you'll be able to see how much a color like this can overtake and create the most amazing effects. All the mixes that will include this color will have the granulation within them. And of course, when the granulating color separates and breaks through, it can create the most amazing texture and granulation. Another interesting combination can be volcano red, Hansa yellow deep, manganese blue hue. You see now, because the volcano red is a highly granulating red, we can see that the orange that we've mixed up in this combination is not your regular orange, but rather a collection of specks of red and yellow pigment that appear separate on the closer inspection. Another interesting window. Now the next window I'm going to create is going to have a different superpower of watercolor paint, and that is transparency. My favorite transparent colors like quinacridone red, phthalo blue green shade, and azo yellow. Now these are the kind of colors that really let the paper underneath shine, and you get a really beautiful glowing effect, especially when you're going from intense to diluted variations in your paintings. So again, another interesting combination. Of course, they will come through much stronger in the actual painting. For my last little window, I'm going to use a reasonably controversial situation where instead of one color, I'm going to use black. Black is quite controversial in many mediums. Watercolor is of course not an exception. If you'd like to, I have a whole video on uses of black in watercolor. But here I'm going to use lunar black. It's a man-made pigment that highly granulates. Cadmium yellow medium and an ultramarine blue. In this situation, I have swapped a red for a black. If you are working on something more realistic, less stylized, then you might like to not do such thing, because that will really shift your palette to a very different direction. But this is why I wanted to show this to you as an example. This can be done with any of the colors. I could have used black instead of blue, which probably would have made it a little bit more realistic. You guys get the idea. Any color can be really used in a very different way, just like you can use white, especially if you are working on a colored paper. Now you see by what I mean, these are like different windows. If you wake up in the morning and you look through this window, you are facing a reasonably gloomy day with perhaps a little bit of the cloud separation and the sun shining in some spots. And if you're looking out this window, you would probably feel like you're waking up in the spring and looking at the beautiful light grass and bright sky. So each one of these would probably call out more to some of you versus the others, because we all have a very special relationship with colors. Let's have a look at how this can play out in the paintings, and also how much of a difference that you would see between the window swatches and the actual little artworks. By the way, I'm really liking using this paper. It's very different from any other watercolor paper that I've used, and I will tell you what sort of makes it quite different very soon. But first I want to show you the techniques as paintings. And of course, this will also give me a chance to test out the new tape that they've sent me. Oh, it actually feels like quite a strong tack. Well, I'm gonna try this out and then we can see. What I will also do is, because this is new paper, so I don't know how well it responds to masking tape, I'm going to test it out on the piece of paper that I love using, but it's very finicky when it comes to using tape, and even the softest tack rips it. You have to be very careful about it. So I will do a test on this paper as well. Both of those will have some kind of ripping, I'm sure. And we'll see this one. Okay, so a quick pencil sketch just to make sure that they're very, very similar in nature. And I'm going to use some of those combinations that I already showed you. So first you dampen the paper. The paper is drying quite well, which means it's really absorbent. I have noticed this when I was doing the other little swatches. So all the colors that I'm mixing, all to do with just these three basic colors, which are Hansa Yellow Light, Cobalt Teal, and Open Rosa. Now I'm going to leave that to dry and then go over with another layer for deepening some of the areas. Let's try this combination: ultramarine, blue, rutile yellow, and pyrrole red deep. Now rutile yellow in this combination is more of an opaque color. So even though it doesn't have any white pigment in it, it does have a feel of that opaque color that has white premixed. It looks very different on paper or when you start to work with it. But because it is so light, it's quite hard to create an intense green. So everything with the mix of this color, like oranges and greens, will have that chalky, soft kind of a look to them. Now again, I'm going to leave that to dry. Okay, so this is our combination number 2. So painting number 3 I'm going to do with this combination, where I'm going to use Volcano Red, Hansa Yellow Deep, and Manganese Blue Chromium. I'm finding this combination a little bit harder to control because I think this granulation just moves so much more than the other colors. Now for this last one, I'm going to go with a completely new variation of colors that I did not show you here. These colors are Indigo, English Red, Azo Yellow. Now you see this combination, instead of purple, it produces this really deep, cool brown, but produces a really beautiful rich green. Okay, so here I have 4 different images which are the same image. The only difference is the variation of the 3 colors that I've used. Now let's remove the masking tape and see how it dealt. Oh, this is going really good. Look, it's coming right off. But it could also be the paper. Some papers work so well with masking tape and some go really badly. So that's why I've done that other test. Yeah, you see, I don't need to like go really carefully or whatever. I'm just lifting it up and it just all comes up. And it did not leak anywhere, which also sometimes happens if the tape is super soft. You get quite a bit of leakage. I'm going to go and I'm going to swatch the colors that went into making each painting. Okay, so let's have a look. So you see how it's the same scene and I pretty much used the same colors. So if there's a purple, I created a mix of red and blue, or the closest to that colors. And if it was a green, I've mixed yellow and blue. And you can see here how much influence it had on an overall feel of the artwork. Now, these are very subtle because these are very quick little sketches. These are not finished artworks. You can see how much softer the colors are, but also more spring-like, very zingy colors, right? So it almost feels like a summer's day. Maybe the rain has just passed and the colors are all shiny and brand new. Very soft colors. It was very hard to mix dark shadows with these colors because you can see what they're like, all right? Now, when we come to this one, I still tried to use very soft colors rather than making them super dark. But you can see the difference between this and this. So this already looks like maybe it's a dusk or maybe the rain is coming or something like that. And the main culprit for that is the yellow which I have been using for this combination. So here the yellow is very milky, and so all the colors that I would mix would turn out to be very hazy, almost a little bit foggy. That's why we've got this softness, even though these two colors are quite strong and very jewel-like. Now, if we look at this composition, then we will see that color-wise, it's quite regular. You know, the blue is quite bright blue, and then we've got the yellow, which is quite deep. But the red is the thing that really makes this work stand out, because it's a granulating color. All the mixes of orange or purple or anything like this are highly granulating. And you can see that even brown, where I've mixed here on the trees, also has quite a bit of granulation. Now this one, I've used very different colors that I did not show you a combination of on this little window swatch. And you can see, because rather than using a strong or bright red, I've used brown pretty much. It's called English red, but it's a very sort of a warm brick-like brown. And you can see that here it came through quite strongly, because all of these, you get these really nice purples. See here, the purples really stand out because I've used pink instead of red. Here we do have some red, but it's quite subtle because it's a very deep one. Here we've got granulating red, so the red comes through very strongly with its granulation. But here we pretty much have no pink, no red, and no purple as well. What do you want? What colors do you like? Can you move a little bit? I need to see what I'm talking about. Okay. So here you can see that the red is pretty much missing, but we've got this autumn kind of a feeling. You know, if this one still has that summer, maybe a rainy sort of a day or something, or maybe sunset that's coming in, because we still get really bright blue here in the back. Whereas here we've got not so much heaviness, but the color is very dull because of the introduction of brown into the combination. You can see how things change, and that's just tiny little sketches. Imagine if you're doing a proper large artwork where you are sticking to specific color combination of 3 colors. You pretty much can mix any color you want. You create such a beautiful harmony. All of these paintings are very harmonious in its color, and it doesn't matter. I could have made them a little bit more intense color-wise or even more washed out. It's the effect that you get from using a limited color palette. And there are lots of different limited color palettes, from 1 to 2, 3, and many different ones. Some carry artist's name because they would specifically stick to one or another limitation. Some don't like limiting themselves, and you can see that this kind of approach to painting can be done not just in sketching, you know, realistic sketching. It can be done for book illustrations. It is very convenient when you are painting outdoors from life, because you don't need to pack so many colors. You just limit yourself to 3. It really has no limit except for the color. And now you can see how, if these were a book illustration, the choice of the color would really impact the feeling that you are trying to illustrate. You can see how the same image really changes the way that we perceive it, just because of the different variation of pretty much blue, red, and yellow. By the way, I got so carried away. I didn't even plan to do this in the video, but I just wanted to try it out for myself. I wanted to try a very simple landscape, but with lots of different variations. And here is what's happened. So hopefully after watching this, you're never going to be in a situation where you're adding too many variations of green, too many variations of orange and purple and blue and so on, and you have something at the end that you did not expect. Whereas keeping your colors very limited can really remove the possibility of such clutter from your work and create an incredible harmony in your whole painting. having specific favorite colors that you continuously use throughout your creations can actually help you create your own style as well. You might be known for using very strong or very subtle colors in your works. But before you stick to one selection, make sure that you experiment as much as you can. Now, I will not be showing you the whole process of these because it took me a while to do all of this, but you can see just how interesting and amazing things can come out. Sometimes you can have really, really strong colors, very contrasting colors, like when they are side by side, like for example this Hansa Yellow Deep, Quinacridone Purple and Bloodstone Genuine. See how bright they are. But when you actually start to mix them, because this Bloodstone Genuine is such a neutralizing color, even more so than the black, you see how soft everything looks. And yet we might have colors like this that are not very contrasty, they're very similar, but when you actually paint with them, maybe it's because of the granulation of the volcano red, or I'm not really sure, there's just the cobalt, that pureness that it has. It is just zingy and bright and such a beautiful landscape. You look at this, you almost want to breathe that air. So yeah, very interesting. And each one of those, they all seem to have a very different feel. They seem to represent different time of day or different season and so on. And just remember that you can take any one of the combinations and they can lay out in such a beautiful, varied way. I'm not saying that you should be doing each painting like this. No way, because different paintings might require different approach. But this is something that can really help you, especially if you're a beginner and you've got a set of 48 colors and you kind of want to use each color, but when you start to pile them on in the same work, you get very, very disharmonious end result. So doing something like this, choosing the 3 colors for a specific painting to stick to, can be great. And that way you can use all of your colors, whatever you have. So I'm going to leave all of these as images on my Patreon. It's very interesting. I love doing tests like this. And I love that you guys can hang out with me and, also have a look at what happens, what comes up, because you never know what to expect. And as you can see, because I've done so many of those variations, I sort of went along and I started using purples instead of reds, or this deep dioxazine purple instead of the blue. And you can see how interesting this almost looks like, when fireworks are going on, it sort of goes like that purple. And now those of you who are watching this tutorial for the Meeden products, watch closely. So what I can tell you about the paper is that the paper is very, very absorbent. It is very thick as well. So see, these are the sheets that I've removed. They're very nice, very thick paper. So there's definitely 300 GSM and you can really feel it. The texture is perfect. I love this kind of texture on paper, especially for this size works. Can be a little bit hard to battle really, really rough texture, but then again, this is just my take on it. I know everyone loves their own way of working. Some people prefer hot press or a rough watercolor paper. This is just the cold press paper. Also, it has that sort of a feel Archer's cold press paper does. That almost cloth-like. I guess it's that 100% cotton. But I've used other brands that were 100% cotton and they did not have that same feel. That almost porous-like feeling. But unlike Archer's paper, this paper keeps your colors very, very intense. Of course, there will always be a little bit of the shift, but this paper has very minimal shift from what your paint looks like when it's wet to what it looks like when it's dry, which is very rare for cold pressed paper, because cold pressed paper has lots of pores. So not just the water that goes through the pores, but also the pigment as well. And so when it dries, this is the thing that I don't like about Archer's paper. It's great in so many ways, but you have to reapply colors in so many layers if you want to achieve any kind of intensity. Now this paper has left most of the colors on the surface, which created very strong, very intense colors. Granulation worked on this paper beautifully as well. I wouldn't say that it was super outstanding granulation. There is one other paper that I use that it just separates. It almost looks like two separate layers when the paint granulates. This paper has a reasonable regular type of granulation, like would probably happen on most other papers. The one thing that I do want to say is using the pen on this paper is a little bit more difficult because it is so absorbent. The pen runs out quite quickly and you have to rest it. That's why I was using two different pens, interchanging them. But then again, normally people who like to draw line and wash kind of art, they usually prefer working on hot press paper. Something to consider because I've used it here just so that I can show you how it reacted to that as well. The tape came off it quite cleanly. I still have to do the tape test on the other piece of paper. In the areas where I have actually created a bubble, when the color dried, it dried with a harsher outline, stronger outline of that area. It usually happens with all the papers, but to create this effect, I usually have to actually drop water on there. And if you watched my tutorial on how to paint leaves, you probably have seen that there is one technique where I actually use a pipette and I drop the water so that it bubbles up to create that effect. Here I didn't need to use that much water to create this, which is great if you love this, but if you love really soft edges, you might not like that. I'm just telling you what I've seen, and you can take this information and apply it to your personal style of what you like and what you don't like. Also, if you don't apply enough water, you are going to struggle as well. As I said, this is a very thirsty paper, or at least that's the feeling that I got. It's a great size for those of you that love working on sketchbooks and don't like venturing out on the larger scale. But I do think that they sell different sized pads like this as well. Okay, so now let's have a look at the tape. Having purple all around the borders would have been really interfering with all the, beautiful colors that I was trying to show you here. So let's have a look if this finicky paper that always rips, how it's going to go with the tape that I've been using previously. Yeah, see, this tape is coming off, but I'll just change the angle of the camera. You see, I haven't even removed it all the way. You see how this is the softest tape that I've ever used, that I've had, that still sticks well enough to not get the paint leaking under the tape. So you can see how, because I'm just going like that, going upwards, it's removing a little bit of paper. So, I mean, something like this is not a big problem. You can just go over with the top side of your nail and smooth it out. That shouldn't be a problem. But here we are testing. So let's see how this tape does. Yeah, well, to be fair, this is a wider piece of tape as well. I think it's a little bit more tackier than the purple tape. But the good thing is that this is a very rare kind of paper where pretty much everything rips it, as you can see. And you can see that this paper obviously has a much tougher finish to it, where that tape did not cause any damage, none at all. Like there's nothing, not even little bits that came up. So I do have good hopes for this tape, but probably not with that finicky honeymoon paper. It's very finicky. So, but the reason why I was using this is because I loved how strong the colors were on this. So because this paper also does this, I might as well just use this now. I really like this paper. I will definitely be using more of this. I wish there were sketchbooks with this paper as well. That would be really interesting. I can also see how this paper will be very useful for beginners as well, because It does not really create blooms very easily. It doesn't create very situations where it's really hard to merge paint or anything like this. Like you can see everywhere, if there was enough water, I went back in there for the sketch, for example, and I've added some more red in there, and it did not bloom at all. This is a very beginner-friendly paper as well, even though this is 100% cotton, which is considered to be artist grade. I think this is lovely. So now I really see why some of you were asking me if I've tried this paper before and telling me how much you love it. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope that you will not only practice this yourself, but also share this with others. I also want to say a big thank you to my wonderful patrons who are supporting this channel and forming such an amazing community over on Patreon. And if you really are serious about practicing and getting yourself to the next level, make sure to check out the videos that are popping up on your screen right now, especially the one where I show you 7 different ways of mixing a watercolor paint. Keep practicing, and I look forward to seeing you soon in the next video.